Excellent. And we've got our priest notes up. So I think it's priest time. Let's see what they've done. So they said, hey, in the class tree, we've moved a few nodes around. Cool. I'll try and figure out what that looks like in a second. Purify. The tooltip now conditionally updates when improved Purify is talented. Good. Masochism. Renamed to Protective Light. So you'll remember this used to proc off of Shadowmend. Shadowmend is gone. So this now procs off of Flash Heal. Very exciting. Shadowmend removed. Replaced with improved Flash Heal. A little bit sad about this, but you know what? I don't PvP that much, so I can... Well, I don't PvP as Discipline, especially. So I can technically live with this change. In fact, this is technically probably better for Shadow, because Flash Heal counts as a holy spell. So now Shadow has access to 2 schools of magic. Maybe that's an improvement. But at the very least, I didn't necessarily think that Shadowmend was something that needed to get pruned when we were looking at all this stuff earlier in the last couple cycles and looking at the feedback threads and all this stuff. Shadowmend is an ability that we've had for a long time, especially as Shadow. It's always replaced Flash Heal for us. It's that thematically purple heal ability, and it's always had that cool thing where like it heals a lot more. It's a really fat heal, but it starts to kind of damage you over time if you're not sort of using it at a smart time where you're constantly taking damage and that sort of thing. So I'm gonna miss it, but frankly, Flash Heal is just the boring version of Shadowmend, and it's not purple, so I think I'll live, if I'm being completely honest. Light's Inspiration change here is very good. So, and in fact, it's actually, you know, kind of appealing to try and path down there now. So I'll kind of see in a second if it even makes sense for Shadow to try and get that, but especially for the Healing Priests, that's a very nice change. They're going to be really thankful to be able to get that. So again, Desperate Prayer right now increases max health by 25% and has the heal associated with it, and with 2 points in this, that's going to go up to 40%. So that's really nice. The cooldown to Dominate Mind was reduced to 30 seconds, was 2 minutes. Sure, I'm okay with that. Seems reasonable. And then Measured Contemplation, the Rune Carving power, they've removed Shadowmen from the tooltip. Fine. No more Shadowmen, goes away. Good. I'm not too interested in these minor changes to Discipline and Holy, so we'll just look at Shadow. They've moved various nodes around in the tree, and we can actually see that in a second. Driven to Madness, and so these three, I believe, are all PvP talents. They both now affect Void Eruption and Dark Ascension, where before they would just affect Void Eruption. This I find hilarious. So they go Dark Ascension, they've slightly reworded the tooltip and Aura tooltip, no functional changes. But then they also go, oh yeah, it's a 1 minute cooldown now. That's huge, Blizzard. That's really big. You just said, hey, your 2 minute cooldown's a 1 minute cooldown now. That's big stuff. Of course it's big stuff. Because this class has been a 2 minute class for all of Shadowlands, more or less. So now you're like, hey, you've got a 1 minute cooldown now. And we had a little bit of a 1 minute cooldown thing going with SFP. And Shadowflame Prism still sort of exists in this tree in this Inescapable Torment thing, which I'm not even really clear on how it's supposed to scale, because right now 1 and 2 point seem to show the same thing. But what this means is, yeah, this spec will absolutely be able to do pretty reasonable damage every 1 minute. And, of course, with PI and Twins, you know, pop off even harder on the 2 minute cycle. So, you know, like, just saying, you know, no functional changes. Well, I mean, making it 1 minute is a pretty big deal, especially with no other changes to the way that the thing works. So, the way I see it right now, Dark Ascension, with no other changes to Dark Ascension and Void Eruption, Dark Ascension is definitely looking like a strong, solid option for most raid fights, especially those where you're focusing on boss damage. Having a 1 minute cycle to play around is going to be really effective in terms of finding those good moments to pump the damage, to really play around mechanics and that sort of thing. If there's a good way for this to line up with SFP as well, in that, you know, taking down that left side, the Mindbender Shadowflame Prism, now called the Inescapable Torment or whatever, and the Charge Idol, right? There's some room there for some good synergy around that 1 minute timing, which is really nice. Power Infusion still in the 2 minutes is going to mean that Void Form is going to still have some potency associated with it, ostensibly. Probably, maybe. But I don't see a world where Dark Ascension doesn't just fly away with single target and with raid, especially with some of the changes that they've made to Void Form. So we'll see that in a second, but that seems reasonable to me. So bit of a fake out here with the no functional changes. Depth of Shadows renamed to From Darkness Comes Light. Yep, no more Shadow Men means no more Shadow Men. Mind Spike, they've properly fixed all the auras, or at least hopefully most of the auras, to buff its damage. This is just a necessary housekeeping activity, so good stuff. Shadow Flame Prism renamed. Now it's a 2-point talent. I hope they clarify what this is supposed to do, because right now it's not doing that, but that's okay. Not too bad. Monomania renamed to Screams of the Void and slightly redesigned. So while channeling Mind Flay and Void Torrent, the tick rate of your Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain, your target, is increased by 40 and 80%, while channeling Mind Sear, the tick rate of your Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Pain on all targets is increased by 40 and 80%. Two major changes here. Void Torrent, which is very nice. Void Torrent is now in the bottom right in the tree. It's kind of easy to skip if you path in a very sort of efficient, specific way around it. And so adding a couple more interactions to make that ability just kind of make sense and really feel like it fits in the kit was really important. So I'm glad that they added this here at the very least. And it's the way that this works, that you're just sitting there sort of channeling an ability. It makes sense for Void Torrent to be affected by that, of course. But also, this is the big one. So while channeling Mind Sear, the tick rate's improved on all targets. And this is really, really big. This is going to be a very powerful node now in AoE, such that when you're actually channeling that Mind Sear, your dots are ticking faster. And that means that all of those interactions on all of those dots are also behaving more quickly. So if you're running, for example, your Tormented Spirits for some reason, and you're actually generating a bunch more ghosts off of those, then great, good stuff. If you're running your Vampiric... oh god, I'm struggling with my names now. My Maddening Touch, where my Vampiric Touch is generating more insanity, that's going to contribute to my Insanity engine while I'm channeling Mind Sear, which is extremely valuable. Generally speaking, now, having your dots ticking faster in that entire AoE scenario is quite nice. You're not Mind Searing all the time. It is still a spender. But I think that this is a very good addition. In fact, before, what would just happen is it only worked on the first on your specific Mind Sear target. One target was being affected by Monomania with Mind Sear. So this is a good change in order for this to actually do something. So I'm very happy about that. They've renamed Derangement to Encroaching Shadows for some reason. Good for them. This is kind of big. So Void Form caught a nerf. Pretty substantial nerf. So for Void Form to only increase spell damage by 10% means, and you can maybe see this in the top right corner, that it now has the same bonus as Shadow Form. And it still replaces Shadow Form, which means that Void Form is not giving you a damage aura anymore. And that's a big deal. This is a very substantial nerf. So they've effectively gotten rid of a 9% damage increase. Not the end of the world, but mind you, this was a big component of Void Form before, that you go into Void Form, you do more damage. Now you go into Void Form, you don't necessarily do more damage. They've also mentioned here, no longer in the spellbook by default. You actually have to talent the Void Eruption to learn it. Fine. Same thing with Void Bolt. But I'm gonna go down here to past Dark Ascension, since we talked about it, and go to this line. So Void Eruption now has an additional effect. Each 25 insanity spent during Void Form increases Void Form's duration by 1 second. Alternatively, every time you push Devouring Plague, you increase your Void Form's duration by 2 seconds, right? A full bar of insanity, if you spend all of it on Mind Sear over 2 globals, you're going to extend your Void Form by 4 seconds. Couple of notes here. Void Bolt no longer extends Void Form. Does extend your dots, does not extend Void Form. I believe it's still on the 6-second thing, which is to say, once every 4 globals, you can cast a Void Bolt. But this whole thing is very noteworthy. So you couple these changes together where they've gotten rid of this aura on Void Form, and now they've changed the way that you extend it. In fact, they've changed it in a way where you can actually extend it much longer than you would have been able to before. It's pretty substantial. They have definitely carved out a separate identity for what DA, Dark Ascension, and Void Eruption are. They have built niches for these. Now, we'll see. I will pull up also the blue post that accompanied this. I've only skimmed it, so I'll have pretty fresh takes to go with that one when I actually read the blue post there. But my immediate initial reaction here, looking at Dark Ascension and looking at Void Form, is that Dark Ascension is pretty clearly my single target burst once every minute. In fact, pretty much every raid encounter, I'm just going to be slamming Dark Ascension. It's a no-brainer, and I'm going to play around that as best I can, which means I'm going to be leveraging Mind Spike as best I can because it's really going to benefit from that direct damage. I'm going to take my derangement, renamed to Encroaching Shadows to really leverage the punchy initial damage from my Devouring Plague. And because I'm in a single target situation where I'm just funneling I'm funneling all of my insanity into single Devouring Plagues, I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to keep up mastery uptime during that entire Dark Ascension window pretty easily. Just I don't even really need extension on Vampiric Touch and Pain, and I am, generally speaking, generating enough to have pretty good uptime on my Devouring Plague on one target. So I'm indifferent to that element of Void Form, where it's still giving me that mastery benefit. In AoE, that's a completely different story, where Dark Ascension was saying, hey, I'm benefiting your direct damage. Well, our AoE engine right now is almost entirely periodic damage. Between our dots, between Mind Sear, some of the other stuff around like N'Zoth and that kind of thing, once that gets fixed, it doesn't interact really with anything. And then when we're talking about stuff like Shadow Flame Prism, let's say, right? Not necessarily something that I'm looking for scaling in direct damage from Dark Ascension, but Void Form is really nice to scale all of those abilities, and it ensures that I get full value from my mastery over the entire duration that's up. And that's been, generally speaking, an important part of Void Form in Shadow AoE, is that, hey, I don't have a way to ensure that I have Devouring Plague on everything. That's crazy. I don't have a way to do that. In fact, I don't really even have a good way to get Vampiric Touch on everything in a really big pull. So being able to go into Void Eruption and say, hey, give me full value from my mastery as if I have all 3 dots on everything is incredibly valuable. And this really reinforces it, right? So, Dark Ascension has its own multiplier but doesn't do anything for your mastery. It's assumed you're going to have to take care of that yourself with your dots. In an AoE situation, Void Form's going to take care of that for you. So it's pretty clear to me that, okay, Void Form is going to be that AoE engine. It's going to extend your dots, of course, with if we take the appropriate talents with Mind Flay and with Mind Sear. Void Bolt's also going to help with extending our dots. But we're then extending Void Form. We're buffing all of it with just the aura on Void Form, which frankly is enough of a value added in AoE situation over Dark Ascension. So it separates itself in that way. Now, the one thing, and this is the one thing that I have left in my mind that isn't super clear how well this will work out, is I don't know how valuable Void Form extension is in an AoE situation. I don't know how many pulls, and this is just because I haven't really been in the M+ game in a while. Gonna have to see what this actually looks like, and testing will be really nice for this. Do I need a 40-second Void Form? 50-second Void Form, maybe even longer with like Lust and PI? Do I need a Void Form that long in an AoE situation? Or is the pack going to be dead by then, and then I'm just running around in my extended Void Form until we get to the next pack? I don't know. This isn't obvious to me. I think 40 seconds is entirely possible to be like the full length of a good engagement in an M+ situation. I did see someone in the Shadow Discord say they got to 60, which is kind of unbelievable to me, but entirely possible. I don't see that as necessary, right? So that's one that I'm thinking you might not. Okay, that was a lie. All right, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for clarifying. Because I was gonna say that would be a lot. but that's the one element right now of Void Form that I want to ensure we don't maybe lose sight on is how valuable actually is that extension. If it is as simple as Dark Ascension is for single, Void Eruptions for AoE, right? Is this extension playstyle really doing it for me? And it could be, but it's going to be something more where this is like more obviously valuable in like an M+ setting, and if you're getting into like your 15 for the week, you're going to be like, what am I doing with all this extension? I just have 10 seconds of my Void Form left over at the end, and it's not doing anything. So anyway, That's one that I'm not gonna have much info just from a quick hot take right now. I'm really interested to see kind of what we do with it as a community, kind of talking about it and seeing what works on the beta. So Mindflay Insanity been redesigned. So this is a little spicy to me because before you could pretty reasonably just go. You could completely ignore that this was a thing in a lot of ways and just play it as if you just always had a buff on your Mindflay. You kind of just, you could interrupt your Mindflay, as long as you basically are putting out that Devouring Plague every 5 or 6 seconds or so. You didn't really have to play around this too much. You could just go, like, just try and Mindflay when it's up. You can interrupt your Mindflay and then cast it again. It doesn't matter. This one reads, Devouring Plague transforms your next Mindflay into Mindflay Insanity. Lasts for 10 seconds. 10 seconds up from 5 is nice, because that says, okay, hey, you have some time to really plan for this. But you must not interrupt this Mindflay, or at least you had better have something good that you're doing instead. You shouldn't accidentally drop this Mindflay. It's very important that if you're planning to sit there and channel Mindflay for 2 globals, that you commit to it and you don't mess up. You don't break your Mindflay channel early. And that's going to annoy a lot of people, I think, in gameplay. They're going to start channeling that thing and go, ah, crap, I have to move. Oh no, there goes my proc. I am a failure of a Shadow Priest. And so this is one big change over the old one that I don't think everyone's going to love. But I'm willing to see what it looks like. I'm willing to try it and see how it actually plays. Because it seems okay. Look, this fantasy of, hey, Mindflay is still in the tree, and this is beefier Mindflay. It's Minder Flay, right? Cool. Fine, right? So I've kind of expressed what I think about that anyway. Sure, just a bug. And then, great, also a bug. They got rid of Mastermind and Fiending Dark. So Fiending Dark was the cooldown reduction on Bender Shadow Fiend. And then, if I'm going to remember what Mastermind was... crap. Jared, you got the assist for me on Mastermind? I don't know. I think we'll be okay. I can always pull up the old tree. That was the Mind Blast crit damage. Gotcha. Right, in the bottom section. Okay. That I would always talk to Sale, and he would be like, yeah, that's crap. Don't take it. And I'll be like, okay. It seems good, though, but no. So anyway, that's fine. Look, having just a random extra crit node wasn't necessarily super important, and Fiending Dark going away, not the end of the world. Again, what's going to be nice about this new Mindbender playstyle is that if you have Dark Ascension on 1 minute, you're going to want your Mindbender basically to always line up with that 1 minute anyway. So I think this is an acceptable thing to remove, and what they've done instead, where they've basically lined you up with Mindbender into the new SFP nodes into Yasharge, seems entirely reasonable to me. So let's take a look at the blue post, because I don't think any of us were very happy with with what we heard last week. And again, I just for those of you tuning in right now, but also watching maybe on YouTube the VOD, I'm very, very happy that they came out and actually gave some insight into what's driving some of their decisions around Shadow. I'm just extremely disappointed with what seems to be motivating a lot of the decisions. I am a player that feels very strongly about the fact that our kick is not very good because I want to be able to help my group in an M+ situation. I'm always disappointed when I'm in a random group with like random guildies. We're not necessarily putting together a super like synergistic composition or anything like that. We might just be putting together, a random group with two people's alts, and so we might have a Boomkin and the Shadow Priest in the same group. It might be a thing, and we might just wipe once or twice because we screwed up our 2 kicks that we had. It's just disappointing, and it's really silly when it's now only Priest that doesn't have access to a good kick in the class tree. I'm really disappointed by that. So that one really gets me. As someone also who's been playing Evoker, the fact that Priest is the only class in the game whose movement skill that's affected by Blessing of the Bronze and Time Spiral It's the only class in the game that has an ability on that is not either a personal displacement or has a strong personal movement speed attached to it. It's the only one that has neither of those things. Is hilariously sad both for the priest and also for the evoker, because the evoker now can't say reliably, this button, when I push it, is going to give everyone the ability to move. It gives everyone but the priest the ability to move. And you can try and make up for it. You can go, oh, no, that's fine, though, because I, as the evoker, I'm going to use rescue, and I'm going to take the priest with me. It's like, that's ridiculous. It's silly, right? You put in these cool new toys. You're taking away a lot of movement from Shadowland's mind. And priest is literally, it's the only class that doesn't have one. Same thing with the kick. Only class. So I understand a desire for uniqueness across your classes, that you adhere to some sort of class fantasy. And frankly, I understand that class balance in PvP is tricky. But I really don't want to hear about PvP when it comes to my PvE game. When I'm talking about my raiding, and especially when I'm talking about my random little banana and plus groups. And I find active utility to be some of the most fun stuff in this game. When I've been playing Evoker on beta and I see that there's, you know, a Warlock that's like out of position, and I can frequently, you know, like frequently use Fly With Me like reliably to move both myself and him to the right spot, that's cool. If I were on my priest, though, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to basically spend, you know, 10 seconds basically chaining movement speed to try and get to the right spot. And then hopefully I get there in time. And there's no time to actually use Leap of Faith at that point. It's too late. I'm already, like, you know, having to react. So anyway, all of that to say, I hope there's a little more in here that's a little bit nicer than where we left off last week. But even though they did share some very honest, you know, opinions about where they're coming from a design standpoint, I still disagree with a lot of it, and I still hope that they reconsider on a lot of it. I can live with some of the elements if they really think that this class can't possibly take a knockback because for some reason it would be hilariously broken in every element of the game. Yeah, okay, I don't care, right? Just like a normal ass kick in the class tree so that we're not the only class in the game that doesn't have one. And maybe, God forbid, some sort of personal movement skill like Reverse Sleep or like Door of Shadows so that we're not the only class in the game to not have a movement skill as well. Those are my demands. Whatever. It's fine. Let's go into the post. Just so you guys know where I'm coming from now on utility and that sort of thing. So we appreciate the responses to last week. We've made some additional changes to the priest class this week that are aimed at addressing some of the shared concerns. Class. Power Word Life and Mindgames. Both spells will remain in the talent tree. Okay. While we do want to reduce the number of active spells, Power Word Life is an exciting new spell for the expansion, and Mindgames is a unique and fun spell as well, as the only Covenant spell that we're bringing forward. So we're happy to keep both. In the long term, we still look for areas to consolidate the number of active spells for Priest. Okay. They should continue to probably look to reduce a little bit of the bloat in the trees for Priest. And it is a little bit tricky because it is, you know, this kit that's been around since the beginning of the game. There's a lot of baggage. We've got a lot of dots. We've got a lot of filler spells now. We've got, you know, multiple cooldowns in the tree. We've got all sorts of different, you know, different things. They've done a really good job, I think, in cleaning up the trees a little bit so that a lot of those are now choices. They're kind of out of the way. You really have to go out of your way to get them. You know, and speaking from a shadow perspective specifically. So I do think they've been making some strides. But, you know, also when I'm playing my priest, I do feel it on my bars. We'll have to see kind of where they land with that. But you know what? I also, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, Shadowmend is not necessarily the first one I would get rid of. But you know what? It's probably fine. I could probably live with that. In terms of what they left, so Mindgames, a little bit of a disappointing thing that they got rid of the Insanity generation on it. But it's still just, you know, a very flavorful button for Priest. If they want to throw PvP a bone and say, you know, hey, we're going to keep this around because it's cool in PvP especially, Well, in PvP, or PvE, it's just a strong button that deals a lot of damage. So technically fine. I can kind of live with that. I was never upset when I was playing Venthyr and I had to push Mindgames. It was just a strong button. So that's probably fine. Add on to that, that Power Word Life, and I'm hoping to pull up the trees sort of at the end, is looking like a very, very strong button. Probably I want to take it on my Shadow Priest, so I'm glad that that's staying. We're going to have a fun time theorizing these trees and seeing how to path down to the left side so that we can take Power Word Life instead of Void Shift, basically. So let's see what that looks like. All right. Mind Soothe is now a 12-yard radius AoE with a 5-second cooldown. Mind Soothe is quite niche, so we felt that this improvement to its usability could bolster utility pre-spring into dungeons. We've been asking for this one for a long time. Glad to see it finally kind of come through. This is not make or break. This doesn't change really how anyone looks at Mind Soothe. Anything you could do with this, you could do before. Generally speaking, it's just, here's the thing. Before, if I was in like Mists of Tyrna Scythe and I wanted to walk by the humanoids in that first area, I'd have to sit there and go, hey, wait a second, guys. Let me just go Mind Soothe, Mind Soothe, Mind Soothe, Mind Soothe. Okay, we're good to go. Let's go. Now I can probably just go, boom, AoE. All right, let's go. That's a big quality of life improvement where, you know, before I had to sit there and chain globals. Now you just push the button, right? I would agree Mind Soothe is quite niche. I would agree that it doesn't come up very often that you can use it. It's nowhere near as good as Shroud. But on the off chance that I can use it every once in a while, this is a really, really, really nice change to that ability. I can't say that enough. We've been asking for this one for a long time. They actually gave it to us. I'm really happy about that. So, does this matter in the grand scheme of things? Probably not, but it's a really nice quality of life improvement. So I'm glad we got it. Light's Inspiration. So we've made a change targeting pre-survivability when using Desperate Prayer, both proactively and reactively. I would agree it would accomplish both of those things. So both points in Light's Inspiration, Desperate Prayer will now provide a 40% increased maximum health during its effect. Good change. Good change because it's useful for Shadow, but much more important for Healing Priest, and Healing Priest was suffering from a personal survivability standpoint. This was a good way to go about it, I think. Desperate Prayer is a really nice ability, and I don't think 40% is too strong, but will go a long way in making that feel tankier, so I think that's good. This paragraph, they decided that they're definitely going to remove Shadowmen, so they've done that. We're aware for disciplined single target emergency healing flash heals weaker than Shadowmen. We're going to monitor how this works. I feel for disciplined priests trying to do triage. I am not a disciplined priest or a holy priest for that matter, so go seek out their content for how they feel about that. As a Shadow player, I kind of mentioned earlier, I can live with this change. I preferred my purple heal, but you know what? My yellow heal should probably do just fine. So, whatever. Halo, Divine Star, and Cascade. No, Cascade is here. Cascade was not here before in this conversation. Cascade is a new one entering this conversation. So, let's see what they have to say about that. We've made some changes to Halo for Dragonflight, allowing it to deal increased damage and healing based on distance. We're reverting this change due to negative interactions with Halo's soft target cap and general usability issues. Also, we're changing the targeting rules to Halo. It will no longer deal damage to enemy creatures not in combat. Yes. It will continue to damage players and pets regardless of combat state. Okay. It's probably fine. While this can be considered to be a downgrade at times in solo content, we felt it was enough of an improvement in instances to go forward with the change. Thank you for your feedback. Okay. Good. I can't even begin to contrive of an example of when I would make a decision around the way an ability works and go, oh, you know what? This like... this thing that makes a million times more sense for dungeon content and for raiding might have a slightly adverse effect while you're questing, and so we're not going to do it. I can't even begin to think of an example where I would believe that. So good change, good reasoning, good decision making. Very happy with that. I'm not even a huge fan of Halo as a button, but this is absolutely a necessary change for Halo to make sense in dungeons. So, good stuff. Also, they blacklisted pets from being counted towards its healing caps. I didn't even think of that. So, good. That's really important. I bet the healers probably noticed that immediately, so good. All right, and then regarding Cascade. So that's a spell we've discussed and are considering in the long term. Still considering in the long term, mind you. We want to take the time to think through the spell in the modern talent system. It's a spell that all 3 specs are excited about, but bringing it back in its original form while having Divine Star and Halo, or replacing one of the two, was not the way that we thought best to approach it. All right, so Cascade died for Halo and Divine Star. That's what we learned today. Every time you use Halo or Divine Star, just remember it could have been Cascade. So I wasn't around when Cascade was a thing. It's kind of a little bit before my time / between my time. I didn't really play Cataclysm through WoD, really. But everything I've seen about Cascade, the PvP players, hilariously especially, were the biggest fans of it. But even in PvE, just having an ability that, really feels punchy in an AoE setting is something that they really miss and they really want back. And so I don't have a huge horse in this race, but I'm sure there are definitely people that are really excited to hear that they're still trying to figure out how to get Cascade back in here, especially in a world where they're trying to prune things very aggressively. So the fact that they're still like, hey, can we try and get Cascade back in? What are we going to do? How are we going to do that? I think that's a positive commitment to make. It doesn't really mean much in the context of these trees and what they're actually going to do for Dragonflight or anything like that. But you know what? To at least say, hey, you know what? Yeah, Cascade, we remember that exists. We know you still want it. We don't know how the hell to put it in the trees here with like Divine Star and Halo and all this other crap, not to mention all the Shadow AoE that you're trying to do. But you know what? We'll try and figure it out later. Like, we're going to keep that on the table. And putting it here is permission, basically, for us to go, hey, what happened to Cascade? You remember Cascade? You said that you were going to do Cascade. Where is it? So for them to put it in here is really setting themselves up to get checked later. So they know what they're doing. Keep an eye out for... God, I don't know what long-term means in this situation. It's probably next expansion, let's be real. But just don't forget about Cascade. Especially if it turns out that we're not big fans of Halo and Divine Star. It might turn out to be the case. So... I'm going to read the Discipline and Holy Lines, but not know at all what it means, probably. So I'll just read it, and then we'll go through. Lenience and Evangelism. So like Holy Word, Salvation, and Apotheosis for Holy. These talents can feel mandatory in certain content types. So in a future build, we're moving the choice to row 8. Okay, I don't know what that means. I'm not hugely into these trees. Fine. Expiation and Inescapable Torment. So again, that was the old SFP. These talents are intended to function with Atonement. Inescapable Torment will follow the standard AoE rules, right? So only 1 damage event? Yeah, okay. Cool. And then Harsh Discipline. We've been concerned about the number of active auras, so they hid the stack tracking. Okay, I mean, I don't at all know what that means. Let's just move on to Holy. Answered Prayers. Wow. I don't even know what that node does. Okay, well, the talent's designed to synergize with Prayer of Mending builds while simultaneously being an option to boost Holy Word cooldown reduction. We're excited for the effect. There are 2 interactions we're preventing to balance its power. The first is triggering Apotheosis through Answered Prayers will not reset the cooldown of Sanctify and Serenity, and the second is that casting Holy Word Sanctify and Holy Word Serenity while Salvation is on cooldown will not reduce the cooldown of Salvation by an increased amount. This talent has been met with a great deal of positivity, and we hope you understand our reasoning for preventing these interactions. Okay, so giving some background on some potentially broken double dipping of stuff. I can at least appreciate the insight there. All right, back to Shadow. So Mind Flay Insanity. Hey, Xylan93, thanks for the follow. I'm gonna take a quick second to let the emotes on the screen just flow. Let them go. YouTube, you have Xylan to thank for the quick break in our analysis. All right, here we go. Mind Flay Insanity. We've made a change to Mind Flay Insanity targeted at shortening the amount of time spent channeling Mind Flay Insanity while increasing the value of casting it. Devouring Plague now only transforms the next cast of Mind Flay into Mind Flay Insanity. However, we've increased the damage of Mind Flay Insanity, increased its Insanity generation, and increased its slowing effect. Okay. So I just talked about this before. I'm not going to go and say everything I said before again, but it's definitely going to do the thing that they say it will. I am a little bit worried that people are going to look at this and do the thing where they go, ah, crap, I pushed Mindflay Insanity, and then I had to cancel it, and now I'm a sad guy. It's going to happen. I do think the 10 seconds is probably enough time for people to try and plan around it and not, you know, find themselves just awkwardly having to interrupt it immediately kind of thing. But you know what? This is the kind of thing that if you take this node and you're a Mindflay gamer and you sign up for this, it seems like an element of skill expression that, hey, you can try and figure out how to make it work. So I can at least appreciate this. We'll see how it actually works in practice. But this is something that, I mean, it came up when we were talking about Mindflay Insanity earlier. We'll kind of see what happens with this if it works out for people or not, ultimately. Idols. Okay. So they've moved all of the idols back to being capstones. We think this is thematically appropriate, and they can each be tuned appropriately to be exciting talents to chase. All right. This needs to be said. Right now, the idols, other than being hilariously broken on the beta and having been broken basically since the alpha first dropped, are not the most exciting thing in the world necessarily. The idea of choosing a node that aligns you with an old god in some way is extremely cool. That's an awesome idea. I'm not necessarily convinced that these idols actually do that. However, I know where we are in the development cycle. I'm not convinced that they're going to take the time and energy to actually make these things like really, really cool and interesting. So I'm not going to say I'm settling. I'm disappointed. I wish they could be more. I've seen capstone nodes in other trees that have gotten me really, really excited to play the spec. Heck, I was playing Evoker before, and the 2-point node before the capstone had me really excited to play the spec. So I know they can do better. The capstone nodes are not it for Shadow, unfortunately. Pretty much none of them. N'Zoth is technically looking okay to me. However, it's been bugged since the beginning of alpha, and we don't know how much damage it's supposed to do because it currently still scales with attack power and not spell power. That's a problem. Assuming they fix it and it deals, you know, a reasonable amount of spell power, it's now in a weird part of the tree where it's kind of difficult to access, but, you know, it might be worth pathing to anyway to incorporate into your AoE build because it might be cool. But we don't really know. Add on to that there's sort of a weird element with that one where if the enemy dies before the stack goes off, that's not good, right? So, you know, a bit of weirdness there. And it's hard to get excited about an ability when there's weirdness associated with it. Add on to that some of the other nodes. So, the Cthulhu node is basically the old Eternal Call to the Void legendary that we had. My understanding is that it's just tuned very poorly and that it's not very good at all. And frankly, that was never something that I was excited about in any sense other than the fact that I missed the aesthetic from when we used to have little tentacles shoot at the boss back in Legion. I missed that. But one thing that you'll note is back then, that was just, like... that was the equivalent of a capstone on your artifact weapon. But it was a purely passive effect, and you just pop it in there, and there was no decision-making. It was just, hey, this is a cool thing that your weapon does now. You didn't have to... It wasn't a trade-off for something else you can get. It wasn't, you know, coming at the expense of something else. It was just, hey, you know that weapon that you have right now? It also just kind of summons tentacles sometimes now. It just does that. That's a really... That's a good way to do, hey, here's a random little pet that you didn't ask for. It's just there. Asking me to basically take one of my capstones to just summon a little pet that just kind of fires a little laser beam that doesn't do very much damage or anything for me, really, is disappointing. Yogg-Saron is still disappointing because it's still bugged to all hell. I'm pretty sure it's still proccing off of casts, although I haven't looked in this build specifically. And if it's proccing off of casts and not ghosts summoned, then it's absolutely not doing what it says it's supposed to do. And even if it were doing what it's supposed to do, it's summoning just a guy that just shoots little balls at the enemy. And I'm like, all right, you've ostensibly built this little button that's supposed to do a little bit of cleave, but then it's summoning a guy that does single target. So is it a funnel guy? And if it's a funnel guy, am I impressed? Because it's just a dude that shoots a bolt at my enemy and doesn't even really like do that much. Am I supposed to get a lot of them out? If I have like an army of those guys, is it exciting? I don't know. I can't know because it's been broken since the beginning of alpha. But you know what? If you could surprise me by fixing this bug and then have it turn out that in like a 3-target cleave situation, I'm actually summoning like 3 of these guys at the same time and they're all pummeling the boss because I'm bad at math and can actually spawn 150 ghosts at the same time. If that were possible, hey, there's potential there. But right now, I'm really not seeing it. And then the last one is the last one's Yasharge, and the thing with Yasharge is just that it's that one where your Mindbender is going to have different effects based on the emotional state of your target. You don't see most of those quote unquote emotional states in PvE. You're only basically going to have the one that procs on pull and the one that procs the rest of the time. And that's it. So it's just a passive increase basically to your damage / to your Mindbender damage. And assuming you build the stuff that goes down the left side, you'll take it. It just does a little bit of damage. Oh well. Doesn't feel particularly thematic to take a thing that just gives you a little more damage on pull and or extends your bender by a few seconds. Right? So having gone through all 4, I'm a little bit disappointed. I don't know if it's because I want a little more visual oomph from the idols or that they do a little bit more. It's still 1 per cast. Thanks, Buns. Big sad. For Yogg-Saron, by the way. I don't know. I'm just very disappointed on the whole. I think it could be so much more. I think it could be visually more, first off. Like I do think that there could be some way where when you're contributing to your idol or when you're activating your idol that you get some sort of visual representation of the old god that you're idling, and in that way the art team could really carry the capstone in a way that the mechanic really isn't, because the mechanics really aren't doing it right now. But heck, even something to spice them up such that they had a little more like oomph in the moment that they actually do something would be really great. Because like Cthulhu, to summon my little like noodle dude just on a random proc, which is it's a pretty poor proc, by the way, if it's anything like ECTTV, when I have to invest all those points to get to it is really sad. Yasharge doesn't do anything. It's just my Mindbender. Yogg-Saron, it summons like a Mind Flayer guy, but it's not even like my favorite model of Mind Flayer. He's like just a random he's a random faceless dude, and he shoots little he shoots like little blue pebbles at the enemy. It's like, okay, well, that's disappointing. And then N'Zoth is still broken. I don't know, whatever. That visual kind of looked okay, I'll be honest. When I first saw that visual back at the beginning of Alpha, the visual's okay. It's just I don't know what to say about the fact that thing is still scaling with attack power at this point in the expansion. I need to see like how it actually works. So that's gonna be my rant on the idols. I'm not optimistic that they're gonna see major revisions from here on out. I want them to see major revisions from here on out. I really want them to find a way to make them feel better when you take them. And most likely I'm just going to be disappointed. But I, from a realism standpoint, I know where we are in the development cycle. I'm beginning to expect that we're probably not going to see too much change there. So all of that said, you know what? They committed to putting these 4 nodes in the tree that have the old gods' names on them, and they do a thing. And if they're saying, hey, you know what? We're going to put these at the bottom of the tree. They're going to be the capstones and can be tuned appropriately, right? If they're going to basically make sure that these things at least like do enough damage to feel valuable to take, okay, Blizzard, I will live. I won't be happy, but that's fine. All right, let's leave idols there. Charges on Mind Blast. We've removed the extra charge of Mind Blast from Void Eruption and added it back to Shadowy Insight. Sorry, I just started reading the next line where they said we hesitated, and I'm scared. Why did you hesitate? Baseline, so strictly speaking, this is not a baseline charge of Mind Blast in that, or baseline second charge in that you still need to take SI. You still need to take Shadowy Insight, but that's fine. Like, for all intents and purposes, most builds will take Shadowy Insight, and frankly, a lot of builds will take it just to get this charge of Mind Blast. So just putting it somewhere that we can get it was important. So fair play. We hesitated to do this originally because there are many spells that can proc and compete with one another. Okay. But in the end, that's an argument for having the extra charge, so there's less pressure to cast Mind Blast on cooldown. Thank you for your feedback. This is where it gets stun locked because I'm trying to understand what they're saying. So they're saying, we hesitated to put the charge on Shadowy Insight because there are many spells that can proc and compete with one another. But in the end, that's an argument for having the extra charge, so there's less pressure to cast Mind Blast on cooldown. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry that I got stun locked. I'm still stun locked. I don't know why, like, I can't comprehend why they hesitated here, unless it's just something where they're saying, you know, hey, we actually liked that you had to, like, decide between the abilities that lit up because, you know, we find that compelling to have to actually, like, prioritize. I don't agree with that. I don't know. I'm sort of missing the argument for why they wouldn't have done this. And I will say that this spec needs Mind Blast on 2 charges for the gameplay to make sense. So absolutely, totally reasonable that we finally got there. There is a way to get baseline 2 Mind Blast charges in this tree. It's still technically not baseline, but it's close enough. We'll take the W, go forward. Thank you for 2 charges of Mind Blast. We won't disappoint you by asking for more about 2 charges of Mind Blast. We'll take it. Probably. I will. All right. Screams of the Void. We've made changes to Screams of the Void to improve its effectiveness, especially at AoE. We've added Void Torrent to the single target effect as a small way to increase synergy between Void Torrent and other talents. The more impactful change is that while channeling Mind Sear, all dots will tick faster. All right, so I mentioned that earlier. Screams of the Void is new Monomania. It's just the name changed. Good. So adding Void Torrent, good, because Void Torrent right now kind of, like, again, still strong button, but kind of hidden in the corner of the tree and didn't really have a lot interacting with the rest of the kit, other than the, you know, it's a channeled ability that does a lot of damage, generates a lot of insanity, and it's very punchy. So having it actually interact with the rest of the kit in some way, and especially, you know, old Monomania, this ability that's it's making your dots tick faster. Frankly, if Mind Flay is going to do that, well, Void Torrent in a way is really just beefed up Mind Flay. It's Mindist Flay. If you have Mind Flay and then Mind Flay Insanity is Minder Flay, this is Mindist Flay, right? So it makes sense for this to be part of those interactions. And anything that makes Void Torrent more attractive in those contexts probably makes sense, especially when it comes to, hey, this thing probably should have synergy with the rest of the kit. I can appreciate that. So I think that's something that people were asking for. But the Mind Sear part especially, and they're right, the more impactful change is the Mind Sear part. This is really nice because this actually now does enable certain, you know, like a lot of these passive interactions that you were getting to really activate when you're actually using your spender in AoE. So you're getting, you know, you're getting more insanity out of your Maddening Touch. You're getting more ghosts off of Shadowward Pain if you're running like a Tormented Spirits, or you're getting more procs of you know, death or whatever, right? Just some of these different effects that actually synergize off of dot ticks really come into play in an AoE setting. So really excited about this. This makes a lot of sense to me. I'm glad that they actually made Monomania do that and change the name so that I don't have to say Monomania anymore, even though Screams of the Void is long and anyway. All right, let's see what they have to say about Dark Ascension and Void Eruption. So between Void Eruption and Dark Ascension, we're positioning Dark Ascension as the simpler option that is more frequently available. Breathe in and out. Okay. The simpler option that is more frequently available. Okay, it's definitely more frequently available. Is it simpler? I'm not super sure if that's the case. We felt a 1-minute cooldown would allow it to sync with other cooldowns. Definitely true. A 1-minute cooldown will always sync with everything, basically. Everything except 45-second buttons. We don't have any of those, right? Let me just take a look. Do we... Yeah, shit. But, well, we have cooldown reduction, though, right? Oh, well, that's good, at least. You get that to 30? Hope so. Anyway. Yeah, 1 minute synchronizes with everything except 45-second buttons, so... Good stuff. For Void Eruption, we're looking to carry forward a mechanic that has existed in various forms since Legion, extending the duration of Void form through gameplay. This was an opportunity to tie the extension to something less demanding than casting Void Bolt as soon as it's off cooldown. So moving forward, spending Insanity while in Void form will extend the duration of the effect. Casting Mind Sear and Devouring Plague with Mind Devourer active will also extend the duration of Void form. Okay, so that's an interesting note that I didn't clock before, but they actually did make sure that Mind Devourer is not a bad node to take here. So good call. Good foresight, because that could have been bad. But good stuff. Okay. I'm not convinced here that, and maybe it's just a tuning thing, but frankly isn't everything a tuning thing, that they've really succeeded in making these things separate, equal options that can be used in the same kind of content. I don't think Dark Ascension can ever work really in an AoE setting, and I'd love to be proved wrong if someone actually, does find that they're succeeding in Dark Ascension AoE with some sort of like Psychic Link style like Shadow Crash kind of thing. Maybe in like low keys. But I don't think that ever really pans out in actual like M+ content or anything like that. So I think you're just hard locked into Void Eruption in like keys and stuff. Probably, is my guess. And the thing is that, okay, well, in keys, it would actually be more desirable, I think, to have a 1 minute cooldown rather than a 2 minute cooldown. But a 2 minute cooldown does still sync up with your PI, and you still have twins, so at the very least, every 2 minutes, you are going to absolutely pop off. Or at least relatively speaking, you'll pop off. So I talked before about what I think about the extension in those AoE contexts. I don't know if it's super valuable. Some of it will be. Like, you get some diminishing returns on the value of the extension through time. But in general, that's still the distinction I see. I don't see Dark Ascension as particularly effective in like hard M+ content, but it is on a 1 minute cooldown and has a really strong multiplier associated with it, so it should be very strong in single target and in a raid setting, especially synchronizing nicely with all of your Mindbender and Mindbender support and still syncing with PI every 2 minutes. But on the flip side, right, I don't necessarily see that Void Eruption is competing in that single target setting. They got rid of the extra damage amp on top. You don't really need that mastery benefit on a single target encounter because you're still getting a good amount of sort of devouring plague coverage, I'll say, in any single target situation where you have Mindbender online. You're fine. You're going to have devouring plague coverage for sure. So your mastery, the mastery blanket that you get from Void Eruption is not needed there in that context. So the only real distinguishing thing that Void Eruption is doing now is saying you can use me every 2 minutes. You're going to have a longer duration with Void Eruption, granted, than you would on the DA. It's a longer duration, but it's not as strong of an effect. It's probably not going to be as much. It'll be similar, but not as potent uptime. And the only two things you're bringing are that mastery benefit and the ability to push Void Bolt. And I don't think either of those are potent enough in a pure single target setting to really make or break. So this is one where if they want you to be able to use Void Eruption in single target, I think they're going to have to really play with the tuning here. Because right now it doesn't look to me like that's like that you're going to get that. So, and I don't know if it's desirable. Like you'd have to ask the crowd. Well, I'll be keeping an eye out in sort of Shadow Discord this week. See what people post to the thread later. I'm sure there'll be a ton of replies to see kind of what people think about it. Because to me, I don't necessarily need to, right down the middle, have a choice where I can always play Dark Ascension in every single situation and also play Void Eruption in every single situation. I don't necessarily need that. It would be cool if they set up the trees in such a way where, again, this is the pipe dream, right? But you have like your Kata Mop Wad Shadow Priest on one side of the tree that can play everything in that style, or your Drain Void Form on the other side of the tree, right? This is the pipe dream. It's not going to happen, but, it could in a different universe. But I don't see that happening here. And I don't know that I necessarily need that personally. But it kind of sounds like that's what Blizzard wants, or at least that's kind of what they're communicating. And I don't think they're getting that. So, little confused about that. I still think right now DA is probably just single target, Void Eruption is probably still just AoE, and that's probably just what we get right now. So, unless they make major changes there, or to some of the interactions in the tree in a way that isn't super obvious to me right now, I think that's what's happening. So, all right, moving on just a tiny bit. We're almost done. Sear. We've taken another look at Sear recently and made further adjustments to improve its gameplay. In a future build, it will tick every 0.75 seconds for 3 seconds, consuming 25 insanity per tick, and will not be castable with less than 50 insanity. Yay! We did it! We fixed the Sear ticking thing. In the previous build, / probably in the current build still, it was ticking 4 times over 2 globals, but at 0 seconds, 1 second, 2 seconds, and 3 seconds. So technically speaking, it's still 4 ticks over the 3 seconds, but a couple of things. One, it leads to a little bit of degenerate behavior if you really want to do some really stupid millisecond-based min-maxing, but more importantly, it's just unintuitive because most of our other channeled abilities don't work that way. At least Flay doesn't work that way, so it's a very sort of unintuitive behavior for the thing to do that. So really just simplifying it in this way that we're used to. We're used to Sear behaving this way. This is how it's always worked for us. So just having it tick every, it's on the half second, on the second, on the half second, on the second. Very nice. And then requiring 50 insanity, I think, is entirely reasonable, because what that's going to mean is basically, hey, you can't commit to casting it but only get half a global's worth of value but still incur the global cooldown, right? You're not going to have a situation where you're going to go, crap, I spent 25 insanity, but I'm locked out for the full global, right? Not going to happen. You're always going to be able to tick the thing for the whole global. So I'm sure there's some possibility where you have 50 insanity, you spend 1 tick and then move, but that's just you punishing yourself as far as I'm concerned. So whatever. All right, and finally, Psychic Link. We're adding Flay to Psychic Link. Wow. So that talenting into Mind Spike is not required to have an AoE filler spell. In combination with Flay Insanity against a low number of targets, we foresee this having potentially useful interactions. I can say that it will probably have potentially useful interactions. That's about all I can say. I do think right now Shadow's AoE kit is very open to analysis, to some good APL work, some good... some really good sort of theory crafting and back-end work around really figuring out, okay, in different target counts, how much can we lean on Psychic Link? How much can we lean on, Sear? How much are we getting from our generators, our Shadow Crash spreading VTs? Is there any world where Dark Void comes into play? Are we happy to just pretend that thing doesn't exist? All of the good stuff, right? So there are just a ton of interactions that come into play around, how good is Psychic Link compared to some of the other things? How good are the Shadow Word Death nodes in terms of cleaving onto multiple targets? A lot of this is still sort of unanswered / will depend on a lot of factors, but I do think that enticing damage through Psychic Link is an interesting way to sort of continue to make that sort of space spicy. Especially because, again, I don't see any world where they start to uncap Vampiric Touch or anything like that, so Psychic Link is just sort of naturally a nice place to kind of go with a lot of this stuff. So All right. I think that's it. I think it's the end of the post. So, overall, better than last week. Good blue post with good content, has made some good decisions. I have a couple of question marks still about, DA and Void Eruption, if they're technically, accomplishing the thing that they want to. I'm still disappointed about the stuff that we talked about last week, and I'm still imploring that they reconsider, when it comes to putting a basic kick in the class tree, giving priests some sort of, personal movement skill, even on a long cooldown. Hell, just something, right? And just some of this really basic active utility that other classes get. I'd like, and I don't want it to be because of PvP or, whatever nonsense that we're kind of over. So, probably still a little bit hung up on where we left off last week, but this week's post, largely reasonable. Looking forward to taking a look at the trees, reading feedback, seeing where everyone sort of lands on a lot of this stuff. Looking forward looking forward to just talking about it with the Shadow community and seeing what happens. So, should be a good time. Of course, let me know if there's anything that, you think I've missed or anything else to talk about, but I think that sort of covers the Shadow Blue post, so good stuff.